From Providence, Rhode Island, welcome to the MCU Diaries, a podcast dedicated to the storycraft and meaning behind Marvel. No homework, no timelines, just story. Now, let's break down Earth's mightiest heroes. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the MCU Diaries. My name is Blake. Today, we're talking about Doctor Strange as the multiverse spine. I used to think of Strange as just the wizard Avenger, useful, powerful, occasionally annoying, made great by Benedict Cumberbatch. But the more I zoom out on the multiverse saga, the more Strange starts to read like a deliberate craft choice. Not because he's the strongest, because he's the character Marvel can use to make the multiverse feel like consequence instead of noise. Before we get into the rest of it, though, if you want the written version of this, it's on maryandblake.com. If you want the visual cut with receipts on screen, well, that's on YouTube. And if you want the deeper lab notes with tools you can steal and use on any property or any story that you like, those live at jointhenerdclan.com. All right, let's get into it. Here's the craft question for this entry. How do you make a hyper-competent hero feel dangerous without making him stupid and without breaking the audience's trust? How do you build an endgame around the guy whose superpower is solve it, and then make the solving itself the thing that threatens everyone? In his book, Story, Robert McKee says a protagonist and his story can only be as intellectually fascinating and emotionally compelling as the forces of antagonism make them. Then he also cites a rule that really matters for Strange. He says, true character is revealed in the choices a human being makes under pressure. The greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation. So when we're talking about Strange, we're tracking his choices, and we're doing it through an inevitability spine. This was always heading somewhere. The receipts have always been on the screen, and it's all been leading to Doomsday. And how we're going to prove that is through three craft tools. The first one is moral debt. Mordo said it years ago, the bill comes due, always. If a story keeps letting heroes borrow wins with shortcuts, forbidden tools, and consent violations, the story owes the audience a payment later. The second is the Only-Play Reflex. Pressure doesn't make competent heroes creative, it makes them automatic. They reach for the move that usually works because it usually works. The third is the Alliance Bridge. This is the craft move that makes it plausible for someone like Strange to end up working with someone like Doom. You don't recruit the hero by changing what he wants. You recruit him by tightening the conditions around how he solves problems until the villain's method looks like the only structure left that can hold. It makes it nearly impossible to turn down. But let's start where the saga starts, with the argument, with a Strange under lethal pressure. In the opening chase of the Multiverse of Madness, Defender Strange is running with America Chavez with a demon behind. He catches her, grabs her, and starts taking her power, and America says, "But we're friends." And Strange replies, "I'm so sorry. This is the only way." Then he starts talking about the grand calculus. Within the grand calculus of the multiverse, your sacrifice is worth more than your life. Of course, he gets impaled, and America falls through the portal alone anyway. That scene, though, this is a big thesis statement. When the room closes in, Strange reaches for control by taking the resource and calling it necessary. And the story makes sure you feel the moral shape of it by giving America one line that should stop him cold. But we're friends. Yet, it doesn't stop him. Now, the film tightens the same reflex into something a little bit more personal for Strange, because Marvel is smart enough to know that cosmic pressure, especially with a character that you don't even know in America Chavez, doesn't mean anything if it doesn't echo in the human pressure as well. So we go to Christine's wedding. Nick West asks Strange, did it have to happen that way? Was there any other path as it relates to Thanos? And Strange answers, no, but I made the only play we had. Later, Christine names the trait underneath the sentence in a much more detailed way. She says, Stephen, you have to be the one holding the knife. Of course, Strange tries to float past it with, how long they had that one in the barrel? And Christine answers, a long time. It's a joke, but it's the truth. Then the one-eyed monster hits, and Strange snaps right back into the lane where control works. And that is the Only-Play Reflex operating in two different arenas. Under cosmic pressure, the reflex looks like extraction. Under emotional pressure, the reflex looks like justification, deflection, and retreat into the kind of problem that he can solve. Now, let's scale that consequence, not in a way that's like, what does this cost his love life, but what does this cost the multiverse writ large? In The Anatomy of Story, John Truby writes, it is only through competing for the same goal that the hero and the opponent are forced to come into direct conflict again and again and again throughout the story. A real opponent doesn't just oppose the hero's actions. A real opponent competes for the hero's end state and attacks the hero's method of getting there. Earth 838 is built to do exactly that. Strange is cuffed in a chair while the Illuminati calmly list all of Strange's crimes, but really, ultimately, patterns. Reed Richards says, you never told us the details, only that you had inadvertently triggered an incursion. And then he says, from our experience, the greatest danger to the multiverse, it turns out, is Doctor Strange. And that is the Multiverse Saga, putting Strange on trial for outcomes. And this is a huge craft signal. Strange's method scales. It doesn't stay contained to one emergency or a relationship. If he keeps solving problems by borrowing against tomorrow, the multiverse becomes collateral, really. Now, we need the moment where the story stamps the debt as a rule and not just a feeling that we're talking about here. Christine asks the practical question about dreamwalking and needing a living body. And Strange answers, who said they had to be living? And this warning hits immediately. By the souls, possessing a dead body is forbidden. And then Wanda throws the moral verdict right in his face. Dreamwalking, you hypocrite! And Strange answers, this time it's going to take more than killing me to kill me. So what does he do? He sees the problem and he crosses the line anyway. A dead body, the dark hold, souls attacking, Christine physically protecting his body while he's gone. This is what Strange is capable of. But then the movie does the thing a saga has to do if it wants consequences to mean anything. It keeps the receipt. Wong confronts him later and says, you used the Darkhold to dreamwalk into your own corpse. And Strange quips back, oh yeah, I'm fine. But that I'm fine is the moral debt stamp. It's either denial or a lie. Either way, it tells you the bill didn't disappear. The story has marked him. And at this point, the inevitability spine is already visible. The saga keeps showing you the same pattern over and over again. A pressure spike, a control move, a cost that isn't fully clear. Strange keeps borrowing. The multiverse keeps keeping score. So Why would something like Strange joining Doom ever make sense for a 616 Strange? It's a good guy, clearly joining a bad guy. Well, that's because of what we call the alliance bridge. And the bridge isn't Strange becomes evil. The bridge is Strange becomes desperate for a structure that can actually hold. Strange's saga goal in the multiverse is ultimately stability, rules that hold, and a reality that doesn't collapse. Doom has the same goal. It's stability and order. But the difference between the two is method. Strange wants stability while believing he can stay clean. Doom, however, wants stability by being in charge. The story doesn't need Strange to stop caring about people, because that will never happen. But the story does need Strange to keep facing situations where caring isn't enough, because the system itself is breaking. And Multiverse of Madness gives you the cleanest rehearsal for that trap with the way it frames necessary choices. Wong tells him to take America's power. There's no other way, America says. It's okay, I understand now. And the story is offering Strange the same move the opening scene just previewed. Same shape, but different packaging. As we all know, Strange refuses. No, America. Then he says, I've come here to tell you to trust yourself. And that matters, because it shows you what Strange's line actually is. His line isn't, I never cross lines. He dreamwalked into her corpse, right? His line is, I won't spend the kid. He still uses a forbidden tool to stay in the fight. He still borrowed against tomorrow, but at the crisis choice, he doesn't turn America into the solution. Now, you can see the cruel craft logic here. That refusal doesn't erase the debt. It clarifies the debt. It tells you exactly what Strange will try to protect, even when he's crossing lines elsewhere. Which means the alliance bridge gets cleaner, not messier, because Doom doesn't have to tempt Strange with cruelty. Doom can tempt Strange with order, what he wants. And if the saga keeps escalating to a place where reality itself is failing, Strange's weakness isn't pride. It isn't, I need to be in charge. It's that he's built to believe there is an answer and that he can carry it and that the cost can be managed if he's smart enough. And that is why he's recruitable. And the end of the Multiverse of Madness pushes him into that posture in one sentence. In the stinger, Clea shows up and says, you caused an incursion, we're gonna fix it. Strange answers, not in the least. He doesn't argue the charge, he accepts the job. So here's the inevitability spine in plain terms, with receipts we already saw. A Strange under lethal pressure says, this is the only way, and treats a person as a solution. A Strange under personal pressure says, only play, and treats accountability as something to deflect. A room full of heroes calls him the multiverse risk because the method scales into catastrophe. And a Strange crosses a forbidden line, wins, and then tries to shrug it off with the cost of, I'm fine. A Strange refuses to spend the kid, but still keeps moving deeper into consequence work. That is not a random collection of moments. That is design. Now, let's connect it to Doomsday. If Marvel wants Doomsday to feel earned, the climax can't just be louder fights. It has to be collection. The saga has to cash the receipts it's been writing. And when the bill comes due at the multiverse scale, the most dangerous person in the room isn't necessarily the one who wants chaos. It's the one who wants order so badly he's willing to keep borrowing to get it. And that's why Strange joining Doom can feel like it was always coming. Not because Strange wakes up evil, because Strange wakes up convinced that the only way to stop the collapse is to accept a system that can actually hold. And what moves us towards Doomsday is that Marvel has built a saga engine in the multiverse where shortcuts ultimately have to create moral debt, and Strange is the character most likely to borrow under that pressure. What doesn't work in this case is spectacle alone. In the endgame, if it's just decibels, none of these receipts matter. The payoff has to be moral. The bill has to be paid. We started this essay with a craft question about turning competence into liability without breaking trust. Here's the answer. You don't make the hero dumber. You make his best move more expensive. And you keep the receipts. We open on Strange taking power from a kid and calling it necessary. We end with Strange refusing to spend the kid, even as he keeps walking deeper into the forbidden territory to fix what he broke. Yes, it fits that story for the Multiverse of Madness. The pressure rises, the shortcuts multiply, the debt accumulates. He starts one way and ends in another. When it comes to Doomsday, sooner or later, somebody will show up to collect. Because the bill comes due. Always. All right, that is the MCU Diaries entry for today. If you want the written version of this episode, you can find it on marianblakemedia.com. If you want the deeper cut, however, the behind-the-scenes breakdown, well, you can join the Nerd Clan at jointhenerdclan.com. Of course, subscribe to wherever you're listening to this episode. Follow the show on any of the major social media platforms. Leave a rating where you're listening to this, and tell us next time what you think the pattern is.